Hello again. So, Brexit negotiations have reached what has been described as a disturbing deadlock by European Commissioner negotiator Michel Barnier, as the latest round of talks finished with both sides unable to agree on the size of the UK's divorce bill.
Yeah, now Theresa May has been forced to postpone next week's debate on the EU withdrawal bill amid threats of rebellion from her own MPs. So is time running out for a good deal? The Mirror's Kevin Maguire is with us alongside Mark Wallace from the ConservativeHome blog. Good morning to both of you.
Morning.
So Mr Barnier called it a disturbing deadlock. Are you disturbed, Kevin?
Well, it's getting harder and harder, and of course the government wanted to move on to discussing trade and our future relationship, and we're still stuck on the rights of European citizens in the UK citizens in the rest of Europe, Ireland, and that divorce bill. I suspect many people who've been divorced, I haven't, not yet anyway, will know this goes on with lawyers, but the clock is ticking. The clock is ticking, and it's March 2019, we're going to be out. And unless you begin to sort the future relationship, you get these other issues out of the way, we're going to have a real problem in terms of trading and doing business.
Was this inevitable, Mark, this sort of initial issue with these three major key points?
I think it was inevitable there's going to be an awful lot of drama and peacocking around this process. And, you know, we forget in the UK, because we're not really part of these big talks on things like trade, because that's a power that's lain with the EU for 40 years, that actually a lot of this is about stagecraft and stage management. And so you see these politicians marching up and down, beating their chest, declaring how difficult it is and how much they're definitely going to always stick to their lines, when actually, behind the scenes, I think all of them know that there is some negotiation underway and perhaps further compromise to be had.
So it's basically who blinks first. Let's not look anything other than tough. So in that instance, it would seem sensible then, Theresa May says she's got this big chunk of cash to put aside to preparing if we end up with no deal. That was then to signal to the EU that we would be prepared to walk away if they didn't give us at least some of what we want, and also would mean we have a plan if there is no deal. And yet Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, saying no.
Well, indeed, and we've got to remember this is essential to the process of the negotiations. The line that Theresa May came out with in the general election, that no deal is better than a bad deal, is a key one. As David Cameron found out, if you go to Brussels and say, I want to negotiate with you, but actually eventually I'll end up buying whatever it is you offer, there's no alternative, they're not going to give you a good deal. So it is concerning if the Chancellor isn't so keen on the idea of making those proper preparations.
Is he sabotaging the process? Because, of course, Theresa May famously said, didn't she, when she launched the snap election, no saboteurs, bring down the saboteurs of Brexit. Is her own Chancellor one of them?
I think the words crush the saboteurs with the Daily Mails, but it's definitely the case that...
Did I say Daily Mirror? So sorry, Kevin.
No,
you don't want to be associated with that, do you? I meant Daily Mail.
Give Kevin time. You know, and I think it was Lord Lawson that suggested that the Chancellor was sabotaging Brexit last night. I don't think he is, but it's certainly the case that a lot of his colleagues are getting very concerned about him. A lot of Tory MPs who are Brexiteers are getting very concerned that if the Chancellor isn't on board with this strategy, then that's inevitably going to make it a lot harder to do. When it comes down to it, the PM's got to be seen to govern.
So should he be, the Chancellor, more optimistic, as Conservative MP John Redwood tweeted? Philip Hammond should be just more optimistic about the situation.
Yeah, we could give him a jester's hat and some balls to juggle and tell him to go around and be cheerful. He's looking at the hard figures. He knows what's coming down the line. Always beware of chancellors who pretend everything's sunnier and cheerier than it is. He's dealing with the hard realities. And the fact is...
So you quite like his honesty, then? You quite like what he's saying?
I do. I don't agree with him on very much, but I think he should be straight and up front rather than pretending things are easier than they are. And we're blinking away. Our negotiators are blinking all the time. It's still theirs are just standing there stony-faced because they know they've got more cards to pay. And we were promised £350 million a week for the NHS from some of the campaigners for Brexit. Instead of that, we're going to be spending money on trade negotiators, customs posts, lots of civil servants. Look, it's not coming out the way it was promised. Even David Davis, who's our chief negotiator, now says it's the most complicated negotiations ever. I never heard him say that during the referendum campaign when he was asking for us to quit. He didn't say it at all. People were sold something very false.
When this referendum came up, the whole point of voting to leave, is something that I did and 17.4 million others did, was that the EU has got really deeply embedded in how this country is run. It runs our trade, runs our environment, runs our fisheries, runs farming, runs immigration. It's no surprise that the fact this is so complicated is directly related to how much power the EU has taken over the last 40 years over how we run our country.
We have a say in all those areas. You have an input. We won't when we leave.
Where's our say on our border control?
In the transition.
We've never signed a trade agreement in 40 years.
We're not part of the Schengen Agreement. There's free movement across the rest of Europe. There isn't. Anyone coming here will know you've got to show your passport.
There's still free movement.
We control those borders.
But we did vote. We are in Brexit, so we can't all keep rehearsing. And on that note, you know, when Labour says, oh, we end up with no deal, we'd vote it down. Are we almost at a point, considering how huge this is for us, politically and economically, to get right, that in the way when you're in a situation of war, politicians put aside politics and do a show of strength, don't they, to make sure the other side knows that we mean business? Is there a point where you have to stop sniping, stop saying, oh, you're only doing that because of this, and have a proper show of strength, sit at the table with a poker face?
Yeah, this isn't a war, though, and I hope it's better than sometimes here compared to survive the First or Second World War. A million plus people from the UK died, so whole Brexit isn't that costly.
No, I know, and I'm not being... Don't make it seem like I'm being flippant to that, Kevin. I just mean if this is as big and people's livelihoods and jobs and our future depends on it, why are politicians still scoring points and internally fighting? Why don't we decide and go in tough?
Because people cannot decide. They cannot all come around a common position, what is best for Britain. I accept most Brexiteers think coming out will be better. But other people, with another argument, say we're better off than we are out. And that's why. You even get on within the Conservative Party, within the government. We know Boris Johnson, Philip Hammond are very different. The Chancellor and the Foreign Secretary, different. You can't even get unity within the governing party that's doing the negotiations.
She needs to do what Boris says and get a tiger in the tank and get them all in check.
That's certainly true, and it is part of the huge challenge of Brexit. And what's been fascinating politically in the last 18 months or so is the way this has cut right across party lines. There have been honourable exceptions on the Labour benches, people like Caroline Flint, for example, who, or Kate Hoey or Frank Field.
Other people regard them as dishonourable.
Well, I think they've done the honourable thing, particularly in Caroline Flint's case. She's taken a lot of flack for saying, we had this referendum, my constituents voted this way, the country voted this way, we need to work out the best way to get on with it.
OK. That's exactly what everybody wants. It doesn't seem like that might happen for a while, though, sadly. Kevin, Mark, thank you very much for joining us. It's 24 minutes past 6. England